keep on reflecting on your practice and like your whole life, basically, that you never think like, oh, okay, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is who I am.
This is the Creative Voyage podcast, a long-form interview show with the mission to help creative professionals to level up. I'm your host, Mario De Picolzuane. I'm a creative professional myself, active in the fields of graphic design, art direction, and creative consulting. In this podcast, I present in-depth interviews with some of the world's most inspiring creative professionals, revealing the stories that shape their lives and careers, plus actionable strategies to help you take your mindset and skills to the next level. I invite you to join me on this journey. In this episode, I talk to a type designer and art director.
I'm Pauline Le Pape. I'm a French type designer and art director, currently based in Amsterdam, but I grew up and studied mostly in France.
Pauline Le Pape is a type designer and art director that graduated in 2016 with an MA in type design from École Estienne in Paris. After her studies, her journey took her to Amsterdam, where she's currently based. Over the years, she developed a range of meticulous typefaces and type-based identities and worked on other projects in various mediums and formats with a focus on typography. Some of her recent work includes a custom typeface for Nike, type design and identity for Stadscuratorium Amsterdam, and an expansion of her ever-evolving type family Till. Her work has been featured in It's Nice That, Actual Sources Shoplifters 8 New Type Design, and the Japanese design magazine Quotation, to name a few. In this episode, we're going to listen to the highlights of the conversation I had with Pauline in July 2020. We cover topics such as Pauline's advice to young professionals, the importance of meditation and walks in her work routines, managing finances, including critical mindsets and budget negotiation tips, typography and type design, challenges she's experiencing at the moment, and much more. I'm frequently interested to hear about the creative's transition from a student to a professional. There can be a singular inflection point in someone's development, but more often than not, it's a long, gradual process of trying, making mistakes, learning, and persevering. Almost immediately after graduating, Pauline dived headfirst into the creative market and started working independently as a freelance designer. I found it fascinating, so I began our conversation asking her about that point in her journey, the early lessons she learned at the time, and advice she would give to young professionals who are now starting.
The weird thing is that I didn't really feel like applying to design job, like having a position in the company or whatever. I think I immediately started to feel like this is at least what I want to experiment with. Like I wasn't sure that I would be good at every kind of assignment I would work on. But I was immediately more interested in trying. I think that was, back then my mindset that I really wanted to try. And I knew that maybe I will face difficulties and then understand that it was not the way to go. I think it turned quite well because at the end I'm still doing it and I still love it the way I do it. But I think I just decided basically I want to almost pretend that I can do everything before to actually know how to do it. And that for me, I kind of knew it would be the only way to actually learn, because I realized quite early that what you learn at school is quite limited in a way.
Yeah.
And it's great. And you get some skills and some tools, but I knew that reality would be so much different and harder and that I will miss out on a lot anyway. Mm-hmm. So I just decided that I should try before anything, which was retrospectively quite, I don't know, crazy, or maybe I don't know if it was brave or crazy, but I don't even see myself like this. I think I'm pretty anxious and I wouldn't bet on myself to take this kind of decision, but I kind of just did it like by intuition.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And I think you put it well now. That was kind of my next question, because you said like, I was aware that things are going to be different, things are going to be difficult. And then I think in most cases, people would, based on those insights, they would be like, okay, maybe I should just like work somewhere for at least a few years, get some experience or some money in the bank or whatever.
Yeah.
But you kind of dived in, which is, I think it is brave.
Yeah, now I realize it is a bit, but back then I don't know what happened in my head, but especially, there was one thing maybe because I grew up in a working class family, we never had money. So I wasn't really scared of not having a lot of money.
Okay.
So maybe it did help. I think it did help free myself from this idea. But I totally respect, like, especially my colleague that decided to take a job. I totally understand why. And I think if I did that, maybe then I would save a bit of anxiety if I had, for instance, a more financial stable situation. But yeah, it just happened like this.
Yeah. And then, I mean, if you now, like looking back in hindsight, if you could kind of go back to that beginning or when you kind of decided to do that and started doing it, if there's any like piece of advice you could give yourself at that time?
I think I would advise me to protect myself a little bit more. I think I was willing to give a lot from me, like a lot of my time, energy, but also, yeah, sometimes I should have just, I don't know, have more boundaries maybe. And something that I really started to build up through the time that I didn't have at all at the beginning. I think that I would do that. Yeah, be careful.
When you say like boundaries, what do you mean? Like protecting from what kind of things?
Yeah, for instance, I'm thinking now like about every moment I let, I don't know, maybe some client or client basically invading my private space.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of thing. Like I would tell myself, okay, you have the right to actually have weekends. You have the right to don't answer during the evening, or you have the right to have holidays.
Yeah.
All this kind of thing. Very simple actually, but simple rules that you just don't let people overpass them.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess, was it similar with also maybe the amount of time you were giving to people or like the how contracts were structured or the budgets or similar things?
Yeah, I think it's something that I mean, obviously, as most of people, you don't really learn in school the whole business part of it. And especially, like making sure that the project is not going to take 6 months when you thought it will be like a matter of 2 weeks. Because, of course, then, you accept to be paid a certain amount of money. And if you can't sustain yourself just because you're busy for 6 months with this project and you thought it will be just 2 weeks, then it's a big problem. So I think that's something very simple, but being able to write contracts, to agree on this kind of stuff with clients. I wish I knew it better and I knew it earlier.
Yeah. And are there like any specific resources which kind of like helped you with that? Like any certain like books or courses or websites or how did you kind of like learn those things now?
Yeah, I think it happened quite organically.
Yeah.
I would say. So it's not really a book or courses. I actually last year followed kind of small business courses for creative that helped a lot. Even though there was a lot of things that I technically knew, but in a way, hearing someone telling you that you really deserve to have clear contract and like to protect yourself, to have slack time, this kind of thing, help that is not just you deciding this, but that someone is saying you this is absolutely normal. But it was also just a matter of failing a lot and repeating mistakes and then thinking, okay, this specific thing, never again. And sometimes it still happens, but at least you start to have kind of your list of red flags.
Yeah. So let's follow kind of this thread. Now we kind of talked about, let's say, advice you would give to yourself maybe at the time. Following that idea, there's so many people like graduating, entering design industry currently, and you're certainly like a couple of years ahead of those people, and you're doing like really interesting work. So I'm curious, what advice would you give to those like young professionals who are now entering into type design, graphic design?
Could be a bit surprising, but I would probably advise to slow down in general, to take the time. And I know sometimes it doesn't seem so possible to take the time for very technical reason that everyone has to face. Like, you have to pay your rent. So like taking your time, fine, but you still have to sustain yourself. But it doesn't mean taking a big time. It means taking good time to always check on yourself. Check on, is what I'm doing in line with my values? How do I want to evolve? Why do I do what I do? Is it because I heard it from my schoolmate or my teacher or my parents, or what I think the society is expecting from me? All these things that that everyone has to deal with. And I would strongly advise to really take a step back and trying to look at yourself from a different perspective and do it actually regularly. I also do it all the time to really check, am I in the right place? Do I still like it? How can I improve this and this or that? I think that's very important.
Many of my colleagues and friends are freelancers, and I've been working as one for years. So I'm aware that the work routines of creatives vary significantly, which I find exciting and inspiring. I was curious to hear what makes Pauline's work days, how she manages her time, and if there are any specific habits or practices which she finds indispensable.
I think it really depends on either what kind of project I'm working on, or if I'm actually really busy with project, or just like there is also weeks where I'm just working on typefaces because that's just like the moment I can do it is when I'm not working on assignment. And it's already quite rare, so I'm trying to really focus on this when I can.
Yeah.
But I think what is important for me is to don't have a too stiff routine, especially when it comes to where I'm working. I like to change location. So I'm renting a studio, which is probably like the best place to really focus on one task and to really get the work done. But sometimes I also need to, do something else. Like, for instance, walking is super important for me.
Okay.
So I think every day I have to walk at some point, and it's always the moment it's just unlock something, and it's always the moment I understand exactly what I want to do in a project. So this is super important for me. I need to do quite a lot of meditation as well, and it's the same process. Somehow it just like keep my mind fresh or like even refresh my mind. So and it's not properly work, you would say, but I really need to do that.
Yeah.
It's all those tools that I think I kind of developed through the years that make me think clearer, basically.
And then, so let's say like in a day, you said like, oh, you need to go for a walk, you need to like meditate. Of course, you need to like work. So how is that like structured? Do you like, you said you need to meditate a lot as well. Like, so I'm very curious, like, what does that mean?
Most of my day, I wake up quite early. I really take a long time to, just prepare myself for the day, meditate, then eat something, drink coffee. Like it takes a long, long, long time. I always, even when I was a student, I used to wake up at like 5 or something just to make sure I really have the time to do some things before I immediately start.
Yeah.
Then usually I'm ready to actually do like all the mails, all the administration, all the stuff that will be a burden somehow for me if I don't do it in the morning. I kind of need to get rid of this.
Okay. Because
it's always something that stay on my mind, kind of like back there if I don't do it immediately. So I just get rid of this. Basically, that's how I see it. And then I can start, usually during the afternoon, I can start to be creative properly.
Okay. And then do you take like breaks, or do you have like a lunch break, or do you go for a walk like in the middle of a day, or how do you integrate those different practices?
Lunch is super important for me. I mean, maybe it's also, it's probably because of French culture, which is totally different than Dutch culture. Is more or less, you just need to like grab a sandwich or something. And it's kind of like just having fuel for your body. But for me, it's more like, it's way more than this.
Yeah.
It's really important. So I take also, like a good time away from my computer for sure to eat. I really hate to mix the stuff. Also, it's kind of the same process of like rebooting yourself. Kind of the same as what I was saying about the walk. Is the same process that you refresh your mind. So that's something I'm really trying to always do. And I think usually I will be super efficient, like super, super focused for like 2 or 3 hours. And then I need to take a break.
Yeah.
And then I can come back and then I can be, but if I'm trying to force too much, like if I'm trying to work too many hours in a row, not taking a break because I'm going to feel guilty about it, that it just doesn't work. So I really need to also realize that and almost force myself to do it, even when I'm feeling guilty about it.
Yeah. And then you said like you do more of creative work in the afternoon, and then like how long are your like days usually?
Yeah, that's also is something that I'm trying to structure a lot. I'm trying to basically, the day will start around 9 and stop around 6 or something.
Okay.
So I'm trying to keep those very boring 9 to, well, not 5, but 6 hours, just because I need this kind of structure in a way, just because, yeah, it's kind of the same as what I was talking about earlier, that you need to create your own boundaries. I feel like if I'm starting to answer mail or expect mails or expect even ideas to come to my mind in the evening, then I never really rest. And that's just not good for my brain. So I'm trying to, even though, of course, I'm also flexible and sometimes I'm feeling like super energized and then I will work a bit more late or something. But yeah, I tend to parent myself, if it makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And then can you talk a bit about your studio and your workspace? Are you like by yourself, or like how does it look? Is there something important within your working space that like makes your work easier or better?
So I just got a new studio space and I just been there once because, also because of quarantine, I just stayed way more at home. But I think, next week I will start to go a bit more often. And it's a sharing space, so it's not just me, but I really like it. Everyone has his own assignment and everyone is also busy with multiple different things. So no one is there every day, for instance. And I really like that kind of flexibility that so you don't feel like it's like the proper office life. Yeah, everyone has multiple practice. I know some people are, for instance, teaching. I think we will be 5, but it's still in discussion, 6 or 5 people. And most of them, they have jobs like, teacher or, I don't know, being a PhD researcher, this kind of thing.
Oh, interesting.
Which is super interesting. Yeah. So that's quite important for me to be also in contact with people that are doing something different than me. And so I can also learn from those people.
Yeah.
And for the rest, I'm not super difficult, I would say, for the space itself, as long as it's kind of tidy. I'm super tidy myself, so I'm not gonna like spread. I don't need a lot of space, basically.
And when it comes to like the work itself, how much do you like work alone as an individual? Like how much do you collaborate with people? Like how is that distributed?
I've collaborated a lot actually, so I think I'm quite used to it. And I really like it. I think I need a balance between the two. On one hand, I'm really collaborating and it also means, of course, a lot of compromises, but I like it. And it also really, in general, it just helps for me to reflect on your own practice. If I do too much of work alone, then I realize at some point I'm really on my comfort zone, on my bubble. And I think I really need to force myself also to not stay too long there. So even if I could only work on my assignment, I think I will definitely work with other people anyway. I will ask friends or collaborators to join me because I really need that, I feel.
Yeah. And could you talk a bit about types of assignments you have? Because your bio states that you're a type designer and art director. Both can be very broad. So I'm kind of curious, like what kind of assignments you have. Like, is it like how much is type design versus maybe like graphic design versus direction? How is that plays into like a practical schedule?
Yeah, in terms of field, first of all, I think I can tell now that I've been working mostly in the cultural field.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work a lot for museum, for instance, especially in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And I started to do more, let's say, graphic design. So like books or exhibition design, poster design, I don't know, animation, like different kind of stuff that were, more, as I said, properly graphic design. And now it tends to be more and more type design, which was exactly what I wanted. Even if it's through, often I'm being asked to also like give art direction, and then through this lens, I'm gonna create like a lettering or a typeface or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really taking the right turn, I think, for me. For this reason, it's something that I really want to explore more. I don't want to only. I was thinking, but maybe at some point I want to only do typefaces and have like a type foundry, but I don't think that's what I want right now. It could totally change in the future, but I really like the challenge of having a discussion with someone that is looking for something and you helped them to basically draw the narratives around it. yeah, like the whole storytelling
Yeah.
is very important for me. And when you're working on your own typeface, it's still, there is a storytelling, but it's only yours. And this is a relief sometimes, but it's not something I only want to do. I think I need a balance between those two things.
One of the critical sources of struggle for freelancers can be making enough money to earn yourself a living. Especially as a young professional, it can be daunting to navigate the universe of fees, competitors, value, and healthy business boundaries. Here, I talk with Pauline about how she manages that, including valuing your work, differentiating your sources of income, and how to be better at negotiation.
At the studio, we used to have interns, for instance, and that's something that they really want to know. And it's something that creatives tend to hide for some reason.
Yeah.
Not for bad reasons sometimes, but yeah, I think we should all be more transparent about it. And I'm also really trying to be transparent with the people I'm working with on, this specific topic. Like, they need to understand that my work has a value and that my time is also limited. And so, yeah, it's still a struggle sometimes, but it's getting better for, the following reason. I have more people I'm regularly working with. So it helps because there are people that are coming back, and then there is a trust build. So it's becoming better for this reason.
Yeah.
But it's always scary because you have to like fully trust those people on coming back to you, and be confident in knowing that there will be always new project, people that want to work with you. That's kind of scary. To be honest, I think I'm more and more thinking about maybe at some point teaching. And one of the reasons is obviously that it could give me a steady income. Like, even if it's like 1 day per week or something, it's already, but it's obviously not the only reason. It's also because I think it's super interesting to share, and it helps you again to reflect on your practice, to be close with young people.
Yeah.
So for multiple reasons, I would love to do that. but yeah, I'm not doing it yet. But yeah, what can I say? I think I'm also trying, on a very practical terms also, I'm really trying to claim for what I think I really deserve. I think at the beginning I was just also undercharging so much. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, sometimes I'm just thinking like, it was insane. Like, I was not being able to sustain myself at all because of, it was my fault. Like, I was just not asking for enough.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's also because you have no idea. Like, at the beginning, even €500 for a whole project, it almost sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wow, well, it's already like, then I can pay my rent. But yeah, it doesn't work like this. And at the end, you also realize that you are always on the very thin line, always walking on eggs, kind of. And you always come to a point where it's also giving you so much anxiety to be in this position. So now it's something I'm really trying to fix by, being, for instance, open for negotiation. I think before I would also always undercharge because I was afraid to be confronted to someone telling me, no, that's too much. And now I accepted it. And I know that actually if someone doesn't tell you it's too much, it's probably because they could have give you way more. So
yeah. That's usually the case when you like send a proposal in and they just say yes. You're like, this was like the budget was like too low. Yeah, when there's some pushback and you manage to negotiate it, then you're on that nice edge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That at least is like closer to also what they can offer, what they expect, and I think it's also even at the end building a better relationship between the client and you, because in a way they know that you know what you're doing. It's also as stupid as, I don't know, when you're buying a new TV, you tend to think that the most expensive is the better.
Yeah.
So if you undercharge, people will also think, oh yeah, it's because she's inexperienced or like she is not that good. It's very stupid, but that's how human brain in this capitalistic society works.
Yeah, it's true. And I remember, I think it was Ramit Sethi, who is this kind of financial like author, and he also does a lot of different courses on like freelancers and like different kind of like side businesses. And I think in one of the interviews on, I think it was like a Creative Live or something, but he talked about, I think, a really interesting point, which is like clients, if they come to you and like you're, let's say, too expensive and they can't afford you, that's in some sense like good, because if you like cost 10,000 of something and they can only pay like 2,000 and you say sure, then you become like that person. And there's never a chance that all of a sudden now, maybe when they're doing well in 5 years, all of a sudden you can transition from 2,000 of something to 10,000 of something.
Totally. Yeah. And it's something that I definitely experienced also, that like I was working for an organization, and then I think we only worked together again like 2 years after. So I assumed that they would understand that it's normal that I would ask for more money. But they were really like, why? Like 2 years ago you asked this amount and now it's like double. Why is that?
Yeah. And then how he like finishes the whole thing is, and then maybe when they do get that budget, then they're going to go to the person who is with those types of budgets from the get-go. And they're going to be like, oh, now we have the budget. Why would we go to like Pauline, who was charging us not that much? And I think that's a good perspective. And I think in that sense, even in my personal like freelance business, it is the case like that. Like it's almost better to be in a position where you're like, okay, it's a disparity between the budget that the client has and what you're charging, and then maybe they can come back, and maybe they can come back in 5 or 10 years, because it's true that like not every business needs like the most, I don't know, high quality or most premium design or any other creative service. Maybe they just need to like work with what they have, and at one point they can afford it, and it does make sense for their business. And then you want to be the person they go to then, ideally.
Yeah, exactly. And I also learned something like very practical also, but let's say, okay, we keep the same example. You're asking for 10,000 and the client comes back to you and say, oh, actually we only have 2,000. And you can also say, fine, but then I'm just going to do less work. Like you propose to keep with their budget, but instead of doing like a full identity or like with all the biggest development ever, then you just do a basic identity and then they can do whatever they want with it. You know what I mean? So you can take it the other way around. And if they're still not interested, then it's not going to work. But
yeah, exactly. Because I think that's an important key in negotiation. Because like if you offer one thing and then they say like other thing and you just say yes, there's no like exchange, because you can say yes, but if you're offering less money, I offer less service or less value. And one thing which in my experience also helped me in like negotiating or like in that exchange where you're like, okay, I'm willing to do this project for half of what it is, but let's do like a smaller scope. And then on top of that, I don't know, you can provide me with like a testimonial, or I don't know, or maybe that's fine, but you have to pay all the budget up front versus in 2 installments or something. Or like there's all these different things you can kind of have in your pocket to, I guess, negotiate with to make the exchange. Because otherwise, if you just say yes, you're just being like a amateur who was like trying a higher price and you failed, and then you're just like, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And those are definitely tools that everyone needs to have. And it's also a matter of protecting yourself in the short and the long term.
Throughout our life, the work we do is a part of a long arc. And as professionals, we need to manage various aspects of it. One of them is self-development or growth, which I find to be a crucial factor in sustained career satisfaction, making it one of the central topics of this podcast. While discussing her routines, Pauline already mentioned some of the ways she's approaching this, and here we dove more in depth and discussed how she's making sure that besides working on client assignments, she also develops as a designer and creative professional.
Well, it's actually super important for me to always keep in mind the bigger picture, as you say. Like, for instance, working on your work ethic all the time. Like, don't fall into stuff that you actually don't like about your practice. I think for me, integrating things that I really care about is really important. Like, I know environment, feminism, inclusivity, all those topics that I strongly believe in. I think it's very important for me that they somehow appear in my work, even if, sometimes there is not like an obvious space for it, but even if it's like more insidious, like I always try to bring something that really makes sense, because that's at the end really what matters for me, that what I'm doing makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of what I mean by also looking at the bigger picture, that I feel comfortable with what I'm doing, that it's not just like a rush on delivering a project to someone and making a living, but really always be very, very awake and conscious about what I'm doing, remembering why I'm doing this. And also, I don't know, being able to explain what I'm doing even to my family or something, like, or friends that are not in the field. So that in a way, it's not just like me in my bubble that is completely disconnected from reality, but that I'm using design as a tool to talk about what is really important for me.
Yeah. And I'm curious, you mentioned some of the practices you have, like taking a walk and taking time for lunch and meditation. And then also now we talked about how you like contemplate and also try to keep that very, I guess, always active. Is there anything else that you do, or even with, I guess, all these things that we mentioned, how like structured is that? Like, do you really like, I don't know, do you put those things like in your calendar in some sense and like really like try to make sure that you do them? Or
yeah, there is this word, I don't know if it really fits in this context, but like reparenting yourself is really what I'm trying to do. And then I'm going to use like external tools to do so. Like, yeah, I'm using my calendar for basically everything. And I'm also, I don't know, using my phone with reminder that I should do this and this and that. And it's not something heavy on my shoulder to have this kind of line. I need structure. I love discipline in a way, which can sound paradoxical because, I mean, I was just talking about, walking and being slow, but I really like discipline. And for me, it's not something that doesn't work together. So yeah, I'm really trying to like really always, again, check on myself. And even if it's also for stuff like going to see an exhibition or like checking, am I reading enough, without putting pressure on my shoulder again, but I'm really trying to make sure that I'm not getting too lazy or too comfortable. So I'm really trying to learn all the time. That's something that I'm quite keen on.
I think that is very crucial. And having those types of habits like really like helped me like personally also like early on, but then I still like do a lot of these things. And it's very much, I think, similar as you. I think in that sense, I'm also very much like a person who puts all these things in a calendar and kind of keep them very close, like very close daily reminders of everything. Not just, oh, I need to do this brochure, but also I need to do other things.
I think it helps you to understand that it's actually, crucial. It's a good word. If you don't do that, then you can also think like, well, it's fine. Oh, I didn't see an exhibition for like a year or something, but it's not vital. But actually, for me, this is how you can also lose touch with what really matters for you and fall into this routine and this life that you don't really like at the end. And you realize that you also, you don't really encourage yourself to learn new stuff. And that's quite terrible. So yeah, in a way, forcing yourself to do all of these things, even if it sounds a bit too much, but I think for me, it works really well.
Hey friends, you're listening to the Creative Voyage podcast. We're in the middle of this episode, so it's time for a short break. If you like this podcast, I'm confident you're going to enjoy the Creative Voyage Monthly Edit, a newsletter for which every month I ask a different creative professional to curate 10 brief recommendations of cool things to inform and inspire, including books, articles, products, portfolios, podcasts, and more, and deliver it exclusively to your inbox. It's a newsletter curated by creatives for creatives. To sign up, visit creative.voyage/newsletter. Thanks everyone, let's get back to the show. At this point in our conversation, I was curious to hear about some of Pauline's professional challenges. Here she discusses difficulties setting appropriate work boundaries, the trap of proposing too many options to clients, and uncertainties due to the current COVID-19 situation.
Sometimes what can be challenging for me is the factor time. The fact that you are asked to be very, very fast and quickly available, which I can totally do. I do it all the time. Like most of the time, I think I should present stuff in a more honest way, and sometimes still like I'm actually busy, but I'm always like, don't worry. And then I make space for people, but doesn't seem like I actually did make space. It sounds like I was just like doing nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm really, really trying to do this effort that no one really noticed probably. But yeah, in a way, I feel like it's a bit problematic how people sometimes make you feel like it's the biggest emergency ever. And sometimes you also realize it wasn't really the case, but they just want work to be done. And I understand that. But yeah, I think the whole world will benefit from a bit of a slowdown. It's very on a broad spectrum. I think everything is just too fast. And we probably all realized a lot of things on this during quarantine, that all of a sudden everything was more slow. But it doesn't mean that everything is collapsing either. It means that you can do things differently. So yeah, that's something that I always found like maybe sometimes I just feel like I'm on a different speed, basically.
But I feel like most people are in that space, but it's more about, I guess market in some sense kind of demands things kind of fast, and there's so much supply on the market. There's other designers, like there's always somebody else in some sense who can kind of do it faster and cheaper, probably not better, but certainly faster and cheaper. So there is, I think, this underlying pressure which we all get caught up in. And then I guess especially if you're like less experienced, it is hard to put those boundaries up. And then like hopefully over time with maybe some track record and confidence, and just like experience in general, like where you actually become better and better, then maybe we can like expand that a bit more and have some of those things. And then following this topic a bit further, I'm curious now, in your last couple of years, what are some of the challenges you might have experienced during your career, like personally, either like certain like setbacks or any anecdotes you might have?
Sometimes I was really reflecting on some event with clients where I felt like it was like so unnecessary the way this person talked to me. And that's crazy that I even just have to say that it's not okay to talk to me like this. It's a lot of small things, but in general, I think it all has to do with power and people using it as a tool to give direction. And I think that's, a total misconception of how to lead a project. You don't actually need to force people to anything. I think it's actually always the worst. It gives the worst result. So as a client, I think, like they should always just, first of all, trust the designer they employ and never try to use power as a tool. Yeah,
I think that's a very good point. And I never actually thought about it in that sense. But I think you're completely right that it is about power, and like, I guess, and then using it. I mean, power can be also used in a good sense, but like this is very much like leveraging that in a unhealthy way. Yeah.
And I think it's also like sometimes putting you in a position where you become the problem because someone uses his power on you and make you feel like you're the base of the problem. And for me, one of the tool I kind of discovered through the years is that you can actually dismantle this kind of energy by just simply like asking questions, for instance. So people can also face that some of the things they do or say or pretend is actually not really making sense and that everything is going to be fine. So they don't have to act in a way that is almost like a parody of themselves.
Yeah.
So it's really something I learned, and also probably, coming back to like giving advice, I think asking questions is always helpful because most of people are actually quite smart, I believe. So if you start to ask questions, they will be able to understand that they're just heading the wrong direction and that is unnecessary.
And I think going back to some earlier points, kind of establishing that type of dynamic in a collaboration is important. And you can do that through, I mean, even how you like present your budget and how you negotiate, and then how you start up a project and the questions you ask during those early stages of, like, let's say, onboarding a client.
Yeah.
Because then you position yourself in that sense that you're like, okay, we're like, let's say, partners or collaborators here. It's not like you're extracting service out of me for the best possible price or something.
Yeah, totally. And like establishing this kind of relation and discussion is always beneficial. And I think clients also they understand it quite well. I think when they realize that you're not here to gain anything or to make them lose anything, but you're really here to make something great together. And you really want to collaborate. You really want to discuss things. But yeah, you're still also, you're the person that you're the expert and you're here to give your expertise. So in that sense, there is like it's not a power thing, but you are totally entitled to also say, and I think it's important to make sure that people see that you know what you're doing, that you don't have to apologize for anything, and that you thought about it a lot, you worked a lot on it, and this is exactly what they need, and they just need to trust you.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any particular challenges which you're kind of facing at the moment?
Well, I would say at the moment, everything has been very slow because of Corona, obviously. So I realized also, well, when we were talking about financial trouble, I realized recently that this kind of event that is completely out of your reach, like there's nothing you can do about it. It's a pandemic thing. So, well, you can't really fight it, but it's putting light on the fact that your business can be quite fragile. And I'm still okay. I still have assignments. So I'm very glad, still busy. But yeah, I realized also that it was different than before. Like there was so many projects that should have been already finished for a long time. And now we just don't know. For instance, well, I'm working on a project for a Spanish institution, but we don't know when this institution is going to open again. So yeah, it was supposed to be done. And now it's like, oh yeah, maybe beginning of 2021.
Yeah. And is there anything in particular that you're kind of like doing at the moment to, I guess, try to like be ready for the worst, quote unquote?
Yeah, well, I must say I'm quite lucky that I didn't have to like, for instance, I'm showing quite some work on social media, but not everything and not also in a very complete way because of course it's social media. You can't be like super, super precise about what you want to show.
Yeah.
So at the moment, I'm also trying to, well, finally gather all of my work, showing it on the website and try to like stop being a bit mysterious. Not that I was mysterious, but just I think before I was just, I always had a project coming in. So I felt like it's not necessary to have a very functioning website. And it was not like a pretension at all. I was just like, as long as it worked like this, it's fine. And now I realize, okay, now I should actually do something about that.
Let's talk a bit more about something that we touched upon earlier. And I think the broader topic, I guess, it's kind of positioning or like developing yourself into the work that you want to be doing. And I'm curious, like you said, that you feel like you're kind of like on the right path and in a good position of the types of work that you want to be doing. So a bit more art direction, more type design or lettering. So I'm curious if you can talk a bit about that and kind of like about that transition of like how that happened. Was it something intentional? And if it was, in what way?
Well, it all came with experience, even though it's not a 20 years experience, but I think I started to really trust myself, which is a weird thing to say. Like one of my personality signature is mostly doubting, which is super important. I still want to be this person, but I'm super glad that I trust myself. And when I take a project in, it's because I know I'm going to do it right. So it's not like an ego kind of thing. Is that I know I take things very seriously. I know I'm going to work really hard. I know I'm going to be extremely focused and give the best, whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. Still protecting myself, but I think I developed kind of, how can I do that? I'm going to say that the machine is kind of rolling better now, that I found my way of working. So that's one thing. And yeah, I'm hoping that it will also just continue, that it will still keep moving in a way. Mm-hmm. That I will still continue to evolve and to change my mind and to adjust and like probably in the future deciding, actually, I'm not really super happy with this part of my practice. So I'm going to do it less and like being able to really adjust the machine again, like to change the settings so that you always feel like in line with what you're doing. And I feel like with the time, I'm just like more and more ready to take bigger projects in. Mm-hmm. Also because I'm super comfortable with collaborating. And like, if you take bigger project, then you have to collaborate. You cannot do anything really great by yourself. Yeah. So I think it's also like one of the components of my will of having bigger project in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And then from that, like very beginning to like now on a more practical level, like you said, you were doing much more, I guess, graphic design. Now you're doing more of other things. Like how do you like on a practical level, I guess, do that transition? Because I think it can be like hard, or like people can like looking from the outside, they can be like, oh, like it's so interesting. Like, how can you like focus on these things and make a living? Because I don't know, when people are like young, you just get all kinds of very random opportunities, and you just take everything because it's, I mean, you need to like, I guess, pay rent, and there's this like immediacy. So I'm curious, like on this practical level, how did you manage that?
Well, in a sense, it's like curating your own portfolio in a way. And it's not always easy because, as you said, there is always this immediacy that is like on top of your head. But for me, I think you have to find a balance and understand very clearly what is about necessity and what you actually want to, how do you want to see yourself in 10 years or maybe 5 years? So I'm trying to always try to protect and imagine what will make me feel very proud. And for me, the transition of, I think at first I was like just not confident enough to put work that is very personal. So I would just like kind of hide behind, commission and like just trying to do my best, but not really like putting something very personal into it. And now I'm trying to do it pretty much all the time, like really putting my interest into the project as long as it's not like overpassing the limit of the project itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to also kind of make a bridge between, well, properly a design practice and an artistic practice,
Okay.
which is something I didn't feel like doing for a long time. I think it's very related to also French education, like the master I did. I think it was highly recommended to like stay in your line, like really just focus on type design, and it will be better if you just focus on like the technical aspect of it, maybe the historical, but don't try to cross the line, don't try to be experimental, this kind of thing. And it's something that I really started to do more and more after graduation. And well, living in Amsterdam, I think helped because I feel like it's like saying I'm an artist. It's not a taboo here. And in France, it will be immediately like who she thinks she is. Like it just really, it has a very bad connotation in a way, or like pretentious connotation. And I realize here there is nothing pretentious about it. It's being an artist for me in my practice is about being able to tell stories, and not even my story, but like being the vector of something bigger that is not only serving the purpose of a commission.
Does anything else comes to mind?
Well, no, but maybe it's too general, but I feel like it was always a bit of a failure when I was proposing too many options. I think it's quite typical that the client is always going to choose the worst, or like, I don't know, turn your idea around, or like twist it so much that you're actually going so much away from what you wanted to achieve. And I think this happened quite a lot to me, that at the end I feel like I'm not connected to the outcome because it was so much manipulated. And yeah, you just like give away a bit and then a bit more. And at some point you're being kind of left out from the project and you don't even feel so much responsibility. So that's usually how you give up. And that's something that happened a lot to me.
Yeah. And how do you go about it now when you make a proposal?
Well, I think I'm trying to convince more that is really the best proposal. And when someone is telling me like, oh yeah, but I would like to see like 3 proposals, usually I'm trying to convince them that it's not my way of working, because I usually do 1 proposal, to be honest. I'm not really, it's definitely not what I was taught at school. At school, I always heard that, oh yeah, you have to have 3 IDs with 3 sub-IDs behind those IDs. Well, super, super complicated. And for me, it's not the way I work. Like, for me, I find like the line and then I just continue this line. So there is no 3 line and there is no 3 parallel realities. It's like one thing that I think is the best, and then we can improve it and we can talk about it. But I don't really believe in these like multiple options.
And how do you like offset the possibility of, okay, you find this line, it's very like, let's say articulated and it's a nice concept and everything, but then client really doesn't buy it in some sense. Like they really, maybe they even understand your thinking and everything, but they're just like, we don't like this. Like how do you like address that or that kind of situation?
Yeah, I think then usually I'm thinking like, okay, then let's go back before all of this, because it means that there was a misunderstanding somewhere. I feel like sometimes when it doesn't work is because at the very beginning we didn't really understood what was the purpose. And yeah, I believe that the solution you give always makes sense if you understand well the topic of the discussion. And if there is something that is not going through, then you have to find another way to communicate. And you have to find it could be like, I don't know, that the client thought that they needed a new identity when actually they were not really ready to give away their old one. So that they didn't realize that, but you have to go back and talk about, okay, so what do you actually want? Maybe it's not what you thought. Maybe it's not a new logo or something, but it's I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like going backwards and then trying to entangle what was not said.
I love typography and typographic design, and I admire Pauline's work in the field. So it was a pleasure to explore the topic, her approach to it, and her typeface Till. We started by discussing what makes a good typeface for her.
I think I'm very interested in some very, not paradoxical, but yeah, maybe paradoxical notion. Like I noticed that I like when a typeface is both classical or like very rooted into history or culture, but there is like a kind of a twist, like something quite experimental on it that is quite subtle. So yeah, basically if you can manage to have a typeface that is well balanced, just like well drawn, basically, like that is, so in that sense quite classical, that you follow some rules, like basic rules, but also have a really good eye so you can really see where things are not working, but you can also add some very weird, quirky details. I think for me, that's always what catch my attention.
Yeah. And so how do you approach your own typefaces which you develop?
I realized that I always thought like, oh yeah, I'm not so analog, but actually I think pretty much every time I start a typeface or just the lettering, I always start by drawing. Like I need a pen, or like even sometimes I do calligraphy if it's necessary. So in that sense, I always start in a kind of classical way. And I'm just first of all trying to like find the DNA of the font I want to develop. So kind of like defining the storytelling, and usually in between I'm also writing a lot. Like I'm kind of writing a story behind it. Like I'm writing almost like the trailer of the typeface.
Yeah.
And it's something I usually do, and it was not really a conscious thing, but I realized I'm doing it quite a lot. So I guess that's one of my process.
What are like the current typefaces you either like have or like are being like developed? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, there is one very old friend of mine called Till. It's a typeface I started to develop very long time, and he had like even different names and different shapes. But then I think I came to a point where I think it was also like the point where I started to feel comfortable with my practice. Then I decided to start to sell it. So it was, I think, maybe 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, and now I'm really trying to develop it into something that is not too classical. Like I didn't really want it to have just like the medium version and then the bold version and the italic. I'm trying to expand the storytelling. I was talking about like the narrative of the typeface. I'm trying to expand it to something that is quite particular. And so, for instance, for Till, I'm now developing a kind of like counterintuitive version of Till, because Till is very, very sharp and thin. And I'm doing a Till melted, which is the melted version of it. So there is serif that are kind of round-ish. That could be a little bit like in the Courrier typeface. Yeah. So it's like I see it as like the sort of counterintuitive version of it. Also, like it's melting. So literally, there is letters that are just like blending with each other. So I'm tending to do more and more so ligatures like this. And then I'm working on the monospace of Till, which is also quite counterintuitive. So I'm trying to do something that is really fun for me and challenging, and that I can talk about almost like as a real story and not just like a typeface.
Yeah.
That I'm super happy when people use it. Of course, it's super important. But before anything, I'm really interested in creating the narrative of it.
Yeah. And how do you see yourself like now, but also going forward in this, let's say, the business of typography? You said like Till has been for sale for like a few years. In general, can you give a little bit of like, I guess, an insight in how that works? Like, let's say somebody is like interested in type design and they're starting up and they're working on their first typeface or having like a couple of typefaces in development. How does that side of the practice looks?
Yeah, so I used to do it almost like, I don't know, in between stuff, but not really taking the time for it. So I would say, and I would advise also to consciously making space for it, because you're going to need time. It's you can't really take shortcuts for it, and yeah, it's going to take forever. It's like years of work most of the time.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I think it's just you have to accept that it's going to be a long stretch, and that's something I really like as well. I'm also like developing other typefaces, but I don't even like talk about it because I know it's going to take forever. So if you start to talk too much about it, then you kind of like people expect you to release it, and yeah, it just takes forever. So I would strongly advise to structure your practice, make some time for it, show it to people around you, take some break from some of the typefaces sometimes so you can reflect better on what you did. It's also okay to change your mind, give away an idea that doesn't fit anymore with what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's quite flexible. And that's also the fun part of doing type design in a, semi-professional way, I would say, because if you work on a type only, then of course it's different. Like you really have to keep up with the deadlines. And when I have like an actual deadline or like commission on typefaces, then it's totally different. Like then I really have to like completely focus. But yeah, if you have the luxury to have fun with your typeface, yeah, you should do it, but do it seriously, like serious fun.
Yeah. And then from like a financial perspective, like is making typefaces a business? I mean, I know it is, but I'm curious, like what's from your perspective?
Yeah. I think it's important to make sure that people actually buy your typeface, unless you're having like a project like open source typefaces or which is a different topic. But if you sell your typeface, you have to also be aware of how other people do it. What are the normal prices? If you put the price too low, then it's also devaluating kind of the whole market.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's bad for the whole industry, basically. And it's kind of the case. There is a lot of small type only that sell their typeface for very cheap prices, which could be it could be seen as a good thing, but at the end, I think it's also damaging quite a lot the field. So it's a balance to find. Like, yeah, it depends on also obviously where you're living. Like if you're living in the wealthiest country in the world, then you have to also make your living according to how expensive life is in your country. So you can't sell your typeface for like €10.
Yeah.
Obviously. So yeah, it depends on a lot of factors, but I think in general it's important to understand that it's an industry and that we have all together the responsibility to maintain and to keep it sustainable.
And you work both as a graphic designer as well, and of course you work on your typefaces and have a education in that. So I'm curious, what would be a couple of pieces of advice for graphic designers, but maybe even other creatives who just like work on a simple document, or it can be also professional younger graphic designers who like work on stuff, but they don't have that much typographic experience. Like, what would you advise to them how to improve their typography? So not in making typography, but like using typography.
Obviously, observing a lot is important. I think it's all about educating your eyes. And it's a kind of a vague thing. Like I remember also when my teacher told me, "Oh yeah, you have to educate your eyes." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, well, thank you, but how?" But yeah, you have to like look at things on a critical way to understand why it works and why it doesn't work for you, also for yourself. So it's not only like actual fixed knowledge, but it's also like understand what you like, what you think works or not.
Yeah.
And in a sense, it's a kind of like also contemplation, but like active contemplation.
Yeah. But then on a more practical level, with like, let's say, laying out type, like what are some of those, like, is there anything like that you see and you're like, in general, if you see like maybe other people do or like less experienced designers do, where you're like, this is just like, please don't do this and please don't do that.
I can be quite bothered with micro typography rules that are not respected. But yeah, this is something that you have to learn. But there is like plenty of resources. I learned on the French books that was written like to explain all the rule of microtypography. I think it helps a lot because it's like already a problem that you don't have to deal with. when you don't know all those rules. I don't know at the moment. I think there is books in English about rules in typography, but I didn't study those one. But yeah, definitely find resources like this and try to also think about the use of what you're doing. Like if you're designing a book and you want to have like super tight margin, good, but you also have to realize that people are going to put their hands on it, and then it's going to be maybe like not so useful to have like a super, super small margin, or all these things that are really related to the actual use of an object, basically. Same as also a website, like you have to think about also like the possibility that maybe if you have super good eyesight, but someone doesn't have one, well, then you have to consider that. So you can't have like super small type or so it's like a plenty of stuff that actually just are common sense in a way that you have to look at.
Art direction can be a vague and confusing term. Around more than half of my professional work these days is dedicated to art direction, but just half a decade ago, as a senior graphic designer, I wasn't really sure what it actually meant and entailed. As defined by Oxford Languages, the work of an art director is in overseeing the artistic aspects of a film, publication, or other media production. It's a broad discipline, and as I discussed with Charlotte Heel during episode 2 of the podcast, the role can entail anything from guiding the quote-unquote bigger picture to a more hands-on job tightly intertwined with production. I've used this opportunity to ask Pauline for her thoughts on art direction and how she's integrating that service into her projects.
For me, it's basically being able to create the narrative for your client, so that, for instance, your client is going to come to you because they know that they are lacking on something, or like, yeah, something is not working for them, but maybe they think like, they probably think that they know exactly what they need, but you're going to have to give a direction. So that's like, well, technically it's in the world art direction is really like being able to give yourself the direction to someone. It also means for me that you're going to be able to gather the proper group of people that you need for it. So yeah, it can be, it depends on the context, but it can be that you are going to call collaborators that are like the best at, I don't know, photography or filmmaking or coding or something. So you're going to organize all of this, and you're going to basically put together all the ingredients that are going to be necessary to make the project nice. That's how I see it.
And do you, like, from that kind of like a client perspective, do just like clients kind of straight up come to you and ask for that? Like, so meaning like clients have an understanding of what art direction is and they're kind of like asking you to do it? Or is it more like something that you kind of have to explain and then package up as a service?
Yeah, well, in my experience, it's always been that you have to explain and like come with a plan that they don't even expect you to come with. So yeah, that's just my experience. It's not like in general or anything, but in my experience, it's something that is not always expected, basically. And it's going to be the moment where you actually are going to show your client that you have this expertise that is actually broader than what they thought. They're going to be happy with it, but they just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And you're also going to take responsibility for this whole part of like, yeah, organizing, explaining them. Yeah, you're going to take basically more responsibility than they thought you would take.
We've come to the last topic I've discussed with Pauline, and as with other guests, I've asked her to highlight 3 pieces of advice based on what she learned so far on her professional journey. Here's what Pauline shared with me.
Well, I'm going to start with something that I already mentioned, but like seriously changed my life, is the practice of meditation, which is, I think, something that we should be more open about, because for a lot of people, I think it's still like a bit obscure, but it's actually like a wonderful tool. It's super simple. It's going to save a lot of anxiety. It's going to help you to understand a lot of things about yourself. And on a very practical level, for me, it's like magical when I'm being stressed about a project. I just do that and then it's immediately better. And it requires quite a lot of consistency. You have to do it often. It's not something like that you can only do in a SOS kind of moment, but I totally recommend it to everyone that is open to that. So that's one.
Can I ask a sub question?
Yeah.
Can you give a bit of insight into your meditation practice, like what type is it? Like how long do you do it and how long have you been doing it? Do you use like certain like tools like apps or other things?
So I'm doing it, I think, for probably 3 years now, pretty much every day. And if I don't do it, I really feel the difference also. I don't do it very, very long. Like, I think for me, 20 minutes, it's enough per day, which could be already a lot for most of people. But when you look at what you can gain for it, it's actually not so much. And most of the time using an app, that's at least how I started. So this app is called Pause, but I think it's just French, but there is like a lot of different ones. I used to use Headspace, but back then it was only in English, and I don't know, for me it was just easier to do it in French, so I started to use a French app.
Yeah.
And what I learned through those apps is especially the breathing techniques. All the respiration exercise was something really new, and I never realized that I actually didn't really know how to breathe properly, so that was a big thing. But now I don't even do it. I don't even use it that much. Like not every day. I can also do it myself because I know some exercise that work for me. The only thing I need is to be in a quite calm environment. I know that some people also do it like in the metro or whatever. I can't really do that. But yeah, that's basically my practice of meditation.
And it's basically so like a form of like a mindfulness practice, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like body scan, mindfulness. Yeah.
The second thing?
Second thing, well, this is really in the level of creating your own value and being responsible for your community. It's about taking responsibility to create and keeping a safe space for everyone around you. Yeah, like a inclusive and a healthy work environment, basically, is something that is really fundamental and that you can sometimes like kind of, I don't know, don't think about just because you're in the urgency of life, whatever, deadline, blah, blah. But I think it's really, really important that everyone takes responsibility, that we all treat each other very good. I mean, sounds very naive because it's just like simple principle, but I think it's so important and yeah, not really encouraged or not always easy for everyone to do it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's for me very important.
Yeah.
And I would say it's also because for me, it's an important advice because you're not going to do it, hopefully, for like 5 years of your life. Potentially, you're going to do this for your whole life. Maybe not, but it's a long stretch again. So you have to take care of people around you, but also yourself. You have to create space where you make sure that, yeah, there is inclusivity, diversity, of course, that is safe for everyone. And yeah, if you don't do it consciously, then we just keep staying in this stage of like, non-diverse and very, very dangerous environment sometimes for individuals. So yeah.
Is there anything else?
Yeah, there is one more thing, but it's also something that we mentioned before. I think it's very important to keep on reflecting on your practice and like your whole life, basically, that you never think like, oh, okay, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is who I am. I think it's very important to confront your ideas, to be able to discuss your practice and ideas with other people, to change your mind, to learn, being open, to change within yourself. And basically, it's all about questioning, sharing, discussing, learning, and then repeating.
Hey everyone, that's it for this episode. I hope you find it useful, and if you like this podcast, tell a friend. I want to thank Pauline for coming onto the show. I find her work and typefaces contemporary, beautiful and inspiring, and I'm grateful for all the insights she shared. Links to Pauline's work and some other things mentioned during the conversation can be found in the show notes at creative.voyage/podcast. Also, you can follow @creative.voyage on Instagram, where besides podcast updates and inspiration, we premiered One Lesson Learned, a new feature in which inspiring creatives share their recent project and an actionable lesson they've discovered while creating it. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, and until next time, my friends, take care.